Good morning. Welcome to Morning Meditations. I'm the Reverend Dr. William L. Johnson III, chaplain at Christian Hospital Northeast in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am so proud to be able to share with you another edition of the Morning Meditation. It is always a joy for us to be able to share these messages with you. As often as we do share these messages, we like to slow down just a bit to take our time every now and then to thank our administration, to thank the hospital staff, to thank all of you for your feedback and your well wishes as we share these messages that are intended for two things in particular. One, to give inspiration and to offer encouragement to all of you, those of you who would hear and listen to these words that we share, and also for us to be able to share it in more places than in the hospital or in your local circles. We ask that you would give us feedback about how these messages are coming across, and we hope that you will be enriched by them. This morning's meditation, as we have just celebrated and continue to celebrate the birthday celebration of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we are reminded of the breadth and the depth and the height of his legacy. But not only his, but what it has meant for us to be human beings and those who have been called to serve and care for one another in this united humanity that we share. We live without question in a time of great transition and difficulty, and we are mindful of the fact that sometimes the long tried faithful messages and words of encouragement that we've heard over the years sometimes dim in the light of or in the darkness of our world that we live in. But I'm encouraged, and I want to encourage you today to keep on giving your best to the life that you have. And as we are reminded of all these things, that God sometimes allows for us to be able to know that even though the darkness may come, we believe in the coming of the morning, in the words of Joseph Charles Price. Well, today I do want to begin our message today, and it is entitled Holding On to the Dream. Holding On to the Dream. You know, I've read several things, and then I was reading another one of the readings from Mark Nepo, which is a part of my daily devotion, that offered this story of a spider and the sage, is what he calls it. And in this story, we discover that there is a sage, a wise man, who goes out to the river every morning for his time of meditation and prayer. And after doing so, one of these particular days, he looks out in the river, and there is a spider whose legs are, wiggling away, trying to figure out how to navigate the waters in the river. And so the sage, the wise man, cups his hand and picks up the spider in the water and to lead him over to a safe place on land. And just as he's about to let him down, the spider bites him. It's an amazing thing. The next day, what we discover is that because of the prayers and the time of meditation, somehow the poison from this poisonous spider does not kill or even affect the wise sage. And so the wise sage comes back the next day, and sure enough, he sees the spider, and sure enough, he cups his hand underneath the spider in the water, leads him to the land, and just as he's about to put him down, the spider bites him again. Wow, it is an amazing story. And the next day, the third day, all of these great fables have at least 3 days. And the third time around, the next day, the waters are high, and the wise sage, after his meditation and time, goes out and does the exact same thing, picks up the spider while the spider's legs are trying to find his way in the water, and picks him up and prepares to let him down. And when he does, the spider bites him again. But this time the spider finds words to say to the wise sage. He says, "Hey, don't you know that Every time you do this, I bite you. That is what I do. And the wise sage, the wise man says to the spider, yes, I know, and this is what I do. In other words, I love the story because it shapes how we are to be in the world. The world is a place full of difficulty, a lot of hardship, a lot of mean people, mean-spirited people, people who will do wrong and do you wrong just to do you wrong. And from time to time, we can grow weary trying to be the person who does the right thing, take the high road, and do the things that are best for our society. However, just as those who would bite us like the spider, we are called upon, and we know that we come through it discovering that as we are still good to people who are not good to us, kind to people who are not kind to us, nurturing to people who do not nurture us, that somehow the divine creator of all the universe takes the poison out of their sting and puts us in a place where we can then say that even though they continue to do that, what they do to us, we will still be good, kind, and loving as God has called us to be, because that is what we do. Today's message about holding on to the dream is a reminder to us that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's dream and our dream is not just something that's caught in a vacuum, but it is calls us to think about what it is that we do in this life and how we engage one another. There's a biblical story that I want to point to give some, highlighting or shaping of this point I'm trying to make here. In the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, you see this story with a character by the name of Joseph. He's one of Jacob's 12 sons, really 11 sons at the time. And his father favors him because he really loved his mother, who at some point was the one he wanted to marry. I won't get too deep into that story. But what we see with Joseph, that his father Jacob gives him a coat with many colors, and it fosters jealousy within his family structure from among his brothers and family members who no longer like him because he believes and acts as if to them that he's the only one alive. He has a high sense of himself, so much so that they are jealous of his being. He's not old enough to know what it is his dreams mean, but he has dreams, and he's not old enough to know that he probably shouldn't tell everyone about his dreams. That's a note for many of us. For some of us, we are so happy to share everything about our lives with other people that we're not as sure about what those dreams mean and how to interpret them. And others also think that they know how to interpret the dreams or the visions or the hopes that we have in our lives even before we do. This story goes on, and it tells us that while his father sends him out to see his brothers see him. And this is how it reads. I'm going to share a little bit of the story as it picks up when he goes to visit and finds his brothers in the town of Dothan. And they see him before he sees them. In the 18th verse, it says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. And then we will see what will become of his dreams. This text is one that is a reminder to us that we ought not ever stop dreaming. And even if those around us, our own brothers, family members, friends, those of our own community, those in our own economic background, those who are a part of our own circle, or others who are outside of our circle, no matter where they are, they might not understand what it is that we have been called to do or what we are to do in the world. In fact, the idea that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called for justice and love, at the time we celebrate him now, but at the time he was probably the most hated man in America. And now we find ourselves celebrating his life. In my lifetime, I remember being a young person, hearing the fight and the charge of making Dr. King Day holiday. And many politicians, all well-meaning, fought against that idea. I say well-meaning with tongue in cheek, if you will. But there we found then, as in now, that they didn't know that the markers for the dream did not mean that there will not be transformation happening long after the dreamer is gone. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And in his assassination, just like Joseph, the attempt to get rid of him, those who thought that they would do harm to him thought that they would kill the dream just because they killed the dreamer. What we have learned is that we are called upon to hold up and hold on to the dream. What is the dream? The dream is for the fact, as Dr. King shared, but I believe it's bigger than Dr. King, that God, our creator, creates all of us. And when the creator creates everything, that there's no part of God's creation that has the right to oppress, subjugate, or destroy another part of God's creation just because they want to. Yeah, that's important. It's as simple as that. And as we are navigating in our lives, we are aware that sometimes these things are more challenging than others. When greed and our politics and our pursuits and our desires outweigh our ability to trust that the one who created us has made enough for everybody. There is no scarcity in the world, just people who have small and limited minds and spirits. That's what Dr. King was trying to share with us. And that is what we have to hold on to, that love has no bounds and it never runs out and it never gives out. And so let me share these three things with you I think are important. That if you're going to hold on to the dream, you have to convince yourself to never give up. Never give up. That there are challenges for Joseph in this storyline, that his brothers don't kill him, but they strip him of his clothes, throw him in a pit, and he ends up being sold into slavery and sent to Egypt. And there he goes from the prison to the palace. It is important to know that sometimes the journey is not as easy as we would like to see it be, or the path is not the way we had planned our lives to be. But you can't give up halfway on the journey, or you'll never see the fullness of the journey. It is a part of who we are, and so we have to journey through valleys in order to get to the mountains, if you will. It's important, as Dr. King reminded us, that he had been to the mountaintop because he knew what it was like to go through the valley. So you can't give up on yourself, on others, or on God. Secondly, you should never give up, but you should also never give out. Never give out. You know, I've learned that there is a part of us that just gets worn. You get tired of trying to forgive people who continually and intentionally do the things that they know are not right. It's interesting that Jesus, while he was on the cross, offered a prayer and said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And I, as a minister, often say to myself, tongue in cheek or in a laughing manner, but it's not really. I'm like, God, but what do you do for people who already know what they're doing? The truth is that they may know what they're doing, but they don't know the ramifications of what they're doing. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And many others who were like him during the civil rights movement and those during the great years of being here in this country have found themselves sacrificing on the altars of this country. Their blood was shed, and we have cried and wept. We have seen the turmoil of death and dying and suffering and struggle all around us. We have seen the marks of poverty that have impacted people's lives, especially those who are people of color, in ways that we don't have words to be able to put together. But what we have determined that if it had not been for those who knew that they were tired, like Rosa Parks, and for those who would walk and march even though their shoes were wearing out, and for those who knew that they were taking the lash to the back or suffering the indignity and holding their peace and still being nonviolent while they demonstrated what God's love looks like to the nation and to the world, if it had not been for them being able to hold out, many of us would not be able to do what we do now. I would not be able to sit here where I am now giving this message. And so many of us are able to share with one another and have a richer, fuller opportunity for life. Not that we take advantage of it, but we are all together having an opportunity to share with people of different cultures and races and backgrounds and still hold on to our common humanity. Because somebody didn't give out. I'm thankful for my great-grandfathers, and I'm thankful for my great-uncles who fought in World War II and gave themselves tirelessly, even though when they returned back home, they were not privileged to enjoy the rights that they were fighting for on the battlefield. It is those persons that I salute, and for me, they really are the greatest generation because they did not give up, nor did they give out. Finally, don't give up, don't give out, but never give in. There are some things that squeeze us, and those things that squeeze us bring pressure to our lives in which it's really hard to resist the urge not to give in. The story of Joseph is one that is really important because even though his brothers sold him into slavery and thought him dead, it was what they did that provided for their salvation and their rescue later on when the drought and famine hit the region. It was Joseph who, through his hardship, was prepared for what it is that happened as he was able to lead not only Egypt, but the entire region in that area to be able to be self-sufficient in the time of trouble. Some of us may not know or may not be aware that what is making us who we are is also preparing us so that we would be able to stand when we reach a point of trial, crises, or difficulty. It is always important to know that those things come for a reason. The breaking, the transformation, and then the new orientation to our new life is really important. The breaking, the transformation, and the reorientation of the new life are all important in when we discover change in our lives. And sometimes there are those who have to go ahead of us to prepare us for that. Maybe perhaps it's you for your family. Maybe you're the first to go to college or go to school or the first to choose a different path. Maybe you are a person who is serving and holding things together, barely holding on and holding in. And maybe perhaps just maybe you are the person who is determined never to give up because you won't give up, it might be the turn and the change for everything around you and in your life. Whatever it is today, I want to encourage you so that you will know that you're being supported and that you are loved because the God who created you knew exactly what would be happening and when you would need it as the future would come. Yeah, I love this part. And I am aware that my life is one of many, so that I keep scooping my hand under the spider, knowing that the spider will bite me. But the miracle is that the poison doesn't work. Because when you're doing good and doing right, they may even be able to take your life, but they'll never be able to take your joy or steal your soul unless you give it away. Yeah, I sound like a preacher now, I know. The encouragement from our message of holding on to the dream is to know that the dreams are what we live on when we have nothing else to hold on to. And sometimes in those moments, those are the best moments of our lives. Thank you so much for giving us a chance to share these messages. And I want to encourage you, as I always do, to let you know that you are loved, you are appreciated, and you are irreplaceable. Thank you so much. Hang in there and have a great week.